The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George.
Hey, Lions, how's it going?
Still alive.
Excellent. I mean, here we are again. It's always such a pleasure.
Thank you. So you and I, started to fall down that rabbit hole earlier over chat. And I already put in my notes, this is the obvious opening joke that, I have to do. I'm not contractually obligated to this, when we review, Disney games, but, it still kind of feels like an expectation. I was like, oh, no, we're going to be tempted to do the whole song. So I was like, wait. The one and only way to cut that off is to tell this story, because now if we go back to doing the whole song, it'll be like an Ouroboros of irony.
Yeah, exactly. No, actually, I kind of wanted to send the screenshot of just part of that conversation to you. So that way, or you could just take it and put it in the notes of
Ooh, this will be a good way to get people to check the notes, because maybe I'll put that in there.
Maybe.
Yeah. Anyone who's here who hasn't already now figured out what this is and who somehow presses play on these episodes without having seen the title of the episode, George, what did we play?
We played Portal, the Portal.
Yeah, the first Portal, the one that doesn't get a number because it was originally the only one.
Correct. It is the Great Portal. It's not Portal 1,
That's so dark. That's such a dark way to refer to the first
dark
of
game,
anything.
man.
No, I love that. I'm going to steal the crap out of that.
Yeah, the Great Portal.
Yeah.
A game so huge that when you Google Portal, it is 60% of the image results from Google, despite the fact that Portal is a pretty nondescript English word,
Yeah. Yeah. And that actually brings me into my nostalgia goggles for it, because this game came out in 2007, which we both want to recognize is newer than we thought. And we're not now bringing games this new into our library just yet. But I say that to say this is actually relevant to my nostalgia experience, because when this game was new, it became so memeified so fast, and I didn't have the hardware to play it on at the time. So I thought that it was an older game that I had just missed. I was like, oh, this is an older PC game that I just never got to play because I didn't have a gaming PC. And then when they released the Orange Box for the PS3, that was how I got to play Portal originally. But that was only a year or two after it came out on PC. I thought oh man, I finally get to play Portal. But the truth was I was only 12 to 18 months late to the party. So 2007.
Yeah, because I literally approached you and said, so what's our cutoff exactly for this? Because, if we're saying 2007's a nostalgia game, I got some 2003 titles that I want to throw into the ring. And then you said, yeah, I didn't know this came out in 2007, little cringe emoji. And I was like, yeah, okay. So my nostalgia experience is weird, which is that originally I played this game on a friend's computer, at one point, because they were honestly, they said, a nicer version of, you're a science nerd, you'll love this. And they were nice. Right, but for the wrong reasons. But the thing that that was not my first exposure to this game. My first exposure to this game was in Rock Band.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this song came up, the Still Alive, right? And so, sitting there playing this nice little, guitar, song, and people singing it. I was like, what the hell song is this? And I think you said oh, it's from a video game, it's from Portal. And I was like, what even? I've never heard of it. It's weird. It's yeah, apparently you make portals and, I was like, all right, whatever. And then I played the game maybe 6 months or a year later. I was like, oh, this game's awesome at the time. But is it still awesome? That's the question.
Yeah. And that was part of what made playing it the first time a little scary, right? Is it got popular so fast, and like the memes and the song and the cake references and everything, that like when I finally sat down to play it, I was like, I've never played Half-Life. This is in the Half-Life universe. Like, are all the jokes going to be ruined because I came in with the jokes? Like, that kind of sucked, right? Because that was like right at the early days of like social media, when it was really easy for total strangers to ruin a thing for you, right?
Napoleon Dynamite for me, man. I can't deal with that, because just everyone was like, it's the best thing ever, and we're just quoting it nonstop. And then I watched half an hour of it, and I'm like, I'm good. I've seen it. You've done a play-by-play reenaction of it for me. So yeah, no, absolutely. It was frightening to run that risk. And I will be honest, one of my own personal biases is when people are like, you have to imbibe this thing, whatever it is, food, media, whatever. It will change your life. My inherent response is, I like my life. I don't want it to change that drastically. And so I really, it has a hard backfire effect on me. And I will like, it's difficult when somebody says like, this thing is like the best thing ever, for me to then agree with them. Like, I did not play Pokemon for several years after it came out. I didn't like Rent, the musical Rent, for many years, because everybody was like, oh my god, it's the best thing ever. I just recently started liking Hamilton. Like, this bias that I have has prevented me from taking in things that would be truly enjoyable to me earlier, because people inadvertently ruined them. So I was really worried about that with this, because everybody was saying, oh, Portal, it was Portal.
Although I will say that that's not, the fact that you will circle back just means you need to create enough space that you feel like you can ingest it on your own terms, which is not right. Because if you were just belligerent, and if you were like, yeah, my friend recommended Pokemon to me and I went to my grave having never even learned what a Pokemon was, right? Like that's probably not healthy.
Yeah, no, it's more so like when I sit down at the dinner table and somebody picks up a meal and grabs me by the back of the head and starts trying to shove it down my throat. I like bat them away, but then, later on, after everyone's gone to bed, I will shyly return to the table and like eat the food on my own and say, oh no, this is tasty. I do like this. I just didn't like the way I was being forced to eat it.
Yeah, which I think is, again, not entirely unreasonable. People need to let people enjoy things like on their own terms.
Agreed.
Speaking of not forcing people to do things, let's force people to do things.
Ooh.
Yeah, we're going to show a little bit. If you like what we're doing, that we're not forcing you to do, you're here of your own volition, goddammit.
Well, except that guy behind you, but
yeah,
how is Mike doing, by the way?
He knows what he did. Shut up, Mike. So if you want to support what is apparently rapidly devolved into a hostage situation, you can shout us out on social media. You can leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Links for those things in the show notes. Just personal recommendations are honestly always my favorite, when someone's just like, hey, I like this thing. You might like this thing. Don't do what George was just talking about. Like, maybe just suggest it and don't be like weird about it. But those do, even if it takes 3 or 4 years, those people eventually come back around and maybe they'll like what we're doing. If you want to go a little bit above and beyond that, the podcast reviews are helpful, but you can also like give us money, which helps us run the show, and buy copies of Portal for George's brand new gaming computer, which is why we're finally able to review Portal. Woo!
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So if you want to do that, you can support us on Patreon. And everybody who supports us on Patreon gets the after show, even if you're just at the $1 level. But if you go up to higher tiers, you get other stuff, including your name shouted out on the show. So we want to give a special thanks to first our 8-Bit Classics, Yarno.
A curiosity core, also known as the fluid catalytic cracking unit that made shoes for orphans.
Jason.
An intelligence core who knows that 2 + 2 is 10. In base 4, I'm fine.
John.
A morality core, which they obtained after flooding the enrichment center with a deadly neurotoxin to stop them from flooding the enrichment center with a deadly neurotoxin.
And Kevin.
Keeper of the Aperture Science weighted companion cube, which would rather die in a fire than burden you.
And our 16-bit heroes, Michael.
Wielder of the Aperture Science high energy pellet known to cause vaporization.
And Jacob.
Subject name here must be the pride of subject hometown here.
Our full 3D supporter, David.
Wielder of the Aperture Science handheld portal device, which is more valuable than all the organs and combined income in subject hometown here.
It's just going to be a whole episode of that.
Yep.
So, visuals, I guess, is that what we're supposed to be doing now?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. This is what happens when I have more time on my hands.
No, this is great. I'm looking forward to the show eventually becoming like more thanks than show.
Because when I was going through and doing them, I was like, originally I was just going to be like, oh, I'm just going to pick the cores and then maybe the companion cube. And then I was one short, so I started looking through GLaDOS quotes, and I was like, oh, I can attribute a quote to each of these things, and here we are. Visuals, yeah. So the visuals, for the sake of visuals, are incredibly sterile, right?
That's literally the exact word I have in my notes.
Yeah, I mean, like, because that's the whole point. Is that it's kind of white everywhere, you know? For 90% of the game, right? Where it is not that, it's done specifically to raise dissonance, right? So everything's white and it's completely sterile for like the first third of the game, and then you get your first kind of little taste of something behind the curtain, and it's super not white. It's like this yellow tinged madman scrawling across the wall, and you can't portal onto anything, and you're like, I don't like this, you know? But yeah, it's everything about the visuals of this game are done for a reason. And I think it's because they knew that if they're going to be doing this incredibly mentally intense mechanical thing, they cannot be cluttering up the visuals, right? So my guess is that basically they probably started with like a white room, you know, when they were designing this, right? And said like, okay, here's how you solve puzzles. And then the minute they started to add visual complexity to it, it just fell apart. So they were like, you know what? What's a good excuse for having basically everything be white all the time? I don't know, maybe you're in a science room, like a testing chamber, and it's like, done. It's great.
Yeah. And I will say this now. I was wondering when this was going to come up. I actually used to know the story of how Portal came to be, and it has something to do with basically these like two guys had made a prototype of this mechanic, and I think it was in like a fantasy universe, and then Valve was like, drop out of college and we will give you jobs. Come make this game at Valve. And I'm probably messing up some of the details, but like this mechanic was conceived separately, and then there was a lot of workshopping and a lot of smart people working together, and then out came Portal on the other side. But what I think is amazing about the visuals from a like allowing this game to age gracefully standpoint is setting the game in a super sterile hospital science lab where everything is kind of like gray or light gray means they're not really breaking your computer in half trying to render these visuals, right? Basically everything looks exactly today the way it did in my memory because everything is a flat shade of gray. So It's not like I booted this up and I was like, oh man, this is so 2007 PC, you guys. So, because if you go back and you play like a PS3 game, like you can tell it's from that era because they started to push certain boundaries, and some things they were able to make quantum leaps on, and other things just got muddier and more brown, right? Like that era is just a lot, just like the PS1 era is defined by its graininess, right? So the fact that they have everything so stark is super aesthetic. It fits the world they created. It fits the narrative that they created. But it also basically allowed them to say, you can run this game on a potato. Like, you do not need a powerful computer to play it, which means more people are likely to buy it because it's more accessible. And it was easier to port to consoles. And it means when you turn it on 15 years later, you're like, yep, that's Portal. Looks exactly the way it does in my memory, which is pretty neat.
When the awesome thing is, you know, so white surfaces are portalable, everything else isn't, right? So the nice thing is that, especially at the beginning of the game, most surfaces you can put a portal on it, right? So that kind of gives you a lot of free and safe space to play with the portal. But also, too, is then it basically means that every room is like 90% negative space, right? So that means that you're in a completely white room, and your brain immediately says like, okay, I'm in a completely white room. There's 2 buttons, a box up there, a box down there. How do I solve this puzzle? So that's great from a mechanic standpoint. The thing that I love about this game is, and we'll get into the controls and mechanics and controls and mechanics. The thing I want to talk about a lot in visuals is the aesthetic that they build, right? The world that they build, just by creating this negative blank space for your mind to fill stuff in on, right? So one of the things I love is that, they have all of this white space, but then there'll be a little window with a desk, like a desk and a chair and all this sort of stuff. But there's never any people. You're being tested, right? And there's a computer, an AI kind of telling you what to do, right? But you never see anywhere where there should be people, there aren't, and your brain can kind of process that because there's not a whole lot more to process, And so between that and some of the audio things that they do to kind of raise that dissonance, your brain, while it's almost like it engages 2 sections of your brain at the same time, the puzzle solving section, but also you're trying to kind of solve this kind of grander puzzle of, where am I? Why am I here? What's going on? What is all of this? And that's necessary for the big, spoilers for the 13-year-old game, for the big kick after section 19, where all of a sudden you are sent to your victory candescence. When so we're all of a sudden, like, when it's like, oh yeah, we're going to cook you, it's not like, well, what the heck, where did this come from? You're like, the whole time you're like, no, something's wrong, this is uneasy. And they do such a great job building that with, again, 90% negative space. Like, with most games, it's like, there's 30% of thing A and then the rest is the meat. Everything about this game is 90% of it is nothing, is the thing that most games would throw away in the first 10 minutes. That's what 90% of this game is, right? Like, most of the times people are like, oh yeah, I mean, I guess you have to have some open or negative space, but really we're interested in like the stuff. How much stuff can we fit in here, right? Like, how many lightsabers can we put in the prequels, right? Like that kind of thing, right? This is like, how much negative space can we use? God, sorry, it's good. It's very well done.
Well, and the number of times we have said, like, oh, when you have, a perfectly blank white wall, you'll notice even a single speck of dirt on it because it's the one disruption in an otherwise white surface. And yes, that's true. And you can actually do that on purpose because, as you said, when you get outside the lab or outside the testing facility, everything is like kind of yellow and grungy because you're in like the factory behind it. And so throughout the first 19 chambers, there are small sections where you can see onto the other side of the walls, and then eventually where you can even get onto the other side of the walls to the little spaces where the Rat Man had been hiding and kind of like living in the facility. And those are really easy to spot because behind the wall is like yellow and grungy and gross. So you have this like stark, it's kind of an off gray, right? But this stark like white testing room. And if there's even just that one little crack in the wall where the Rat Man was, it jumps out at you and screams like, hey, come over here and inspect this, because it's this like little sliver of yellow light in an otherwise completely featureless room. And it's just like, oh, if you do this on purpose, that's what this looks like, right? This is people who like minimalist art, where it's like, oh, this is just a blank canvas except for like this one squiggle. And it's like, right, but what do you see when you look at that one squiggle? And it's like, well, obviously there's a tree in front of some mountains. And it's like, right, yes, that's my point, is because of where the squiggle is and because of how it's shaped, you were able to see the tree and the mountains. Because of where that tiny little column of yellow light is, you're like, oh my God, there was a person living in there. And look, there's crap scrawled all over the walls. And oh my, there was a whole life in here, right? And you suddenly just start filling that space all just from that room is gray, this room is yellow. Like that's that color, that hue shift is doing an incredible amount of lift and like succeeds handily.
Well, and 100% co-sign on all that, but also too is that, so, if you have a completely white wall, right, but then off in the corner there's a small yellow light, right, and you go, huh, what's that? And then you like go and you kind of search it out. And you're like, oh man, look, I found all this information. What does this mean? Maybe it means this. Maybe you feel like you figured it out. There's not like any like, hey, Mega Man, there's a big yellow beam over there that's kill you. You know, it's not that, right? You know, it's not the game beating it over your head saying like, ooh, now this thing's going to happen. You feel like you found it on your own. And it's I think one of the reasons why this resonates so much with me is that it's you know, like the Tao Te Ching basically kind of says like, if, you know, in more words than this, but you know, a good leader is one that when he leads his group to where they need to go, the group says, look at what we accomplished, right? And that's what this game does, is this game is leading you by the nose all the time, and never once does it feel that you're being pointed here or told to do this or told to do that. But the game is just, everything about it is pulling you in a certain direction. One of the things that I thought was like also really clever is that everything about this game is diegetic, right? You know, so like when you enter into a stage, instead of all of a sudden it come up and saying, you know, here are the 5 things you need to do in this stage, like here are your 5 accomplishments. No, what do they have? They have a sign. They have a sign at the beginning of every level that says what the hazards are and what are the things you're going to be interacting with. If there are turrets on that level, there's a thing. Because there would be a sign. It's a testing chamber. You need to know, you know, but because I'm being tested on, I need to know, you know. So like when you walk in, you just say, oh, okay, so these are the things that they're expecting of me in this chamber. And then eventually, because they really, the game does, and this is somewhat in visuals, it's kind of hard to decouple from mechanics, but they are doggedly consistent on what they will ask you to do and what they won't ask you to do. You know, so once you're used to seeing certain things, you know that they won't ask you. For example, they will never, ever, ever ask you to portal onto a surface, walk halfway through the portal, and then portal onto something else, right?
Yeah.
If that's what you're trying to do in order to make whatever it is that you've gotten into your head work, you're doing it wrong. You know, and there's a handful of other things where you're like, maybe I can edge the game's, you know, physics engine. It's like, no. The game's physics engine can do things 1 to 10, and it will only ever ask for you to do 1 through 5, because that's how far they feel that they can push you and still have all the victories feel fair. So say all that to say that everything is diegetic and that the signs that they have before each level are brilliant.
They're brilliant, and it's another example of this is such a chicken and egg. Like, I'm sure the story is out there. This game has probably been covered to death. And after we are done, I will eventually go look this up because I'm super curious. But it's so easy to make an argument for, well, these visuals followed the mechanic. They came up with this mechanic, and then they said, these are the visuals that will best support this mechanic. Or to believe that they had thought of this, because this is part of the Half-Life universe, right? So like this universe already existed, and this is taking place like somewhat concurrently with other events in the Half-Life universe. So it is believable that like these visuals and this kind of aesthetic sort of already existed. And then they were like, oh, what are some things we could do in that space, right? Like there was probably a lot of push and pull. I'm sure, I suspect the mechanics came first. But there's a lot of push and pull between like, okay, so that means we need these visuals, which means we need to tweak the mechanic in this way, which means we need this visual to, or actually a lack of visual to support this, right? And kind of go back and forth. A thing you get with all of the diegeticness that is, I think they walked a very fine line, but I think they nailed it, is there are like digital clocks. There's radios, like physical radios in universe that you can pick up and like see how they're tuned and listen to the music and stuff on them. And there's these big signs that are obviously backlit, and the gigantic, ridiculous buttons. Like there are some things that I could imagine a person looking at and saying, oh, well, that puts this at such and such a time in history. But no, I don't think it actually does. I think one of the triumphs of the visual design of the testing facility and what you see like outside of it, like once you get into the catacombs, the backstage,
once you get out of the tutorial.
Yeah, basically. The thing that they did was they made everything like super minimalist in the sense that it makes it impossible to date things. Like to have a little object that is designed to be held in human hands and has an antenna on top is like, well, that doesn't really tell you anything. Like, this radio could be from the 1930s or it could be from the 2130s. Like, it's an object meant to be held by a human with a speaker inside. Like, that's not old or sci-fi, right? The giant buttons are giant buttons, not because it's like, oh, well, see, they didn't even have small button technology by this point. It's like, no, it's because it's part of the test. Like, part of the test is the button design, the window design, the room design, right? The way everything looks is part of how the test is being run, because the Aperture scientists decided that big red buttons don't corrupt test results. I don't know. But like, I love that you said, like, where am I? What is happening? I think one of the things these visuals also drive home, which is somewhat terrifying as you go deeper into this universe, is like, when am I? When is this happening? Right? When is this happening in relation to the other Half-Life games? When is this happening in relation to like the world as I know it? Right? So you're not only out of place, but you're like completely out of time as well.
Well, that, and then, you know, the where am I, who am I, you know, like, these are all questions that, again, like, if this was just in a Mario game, you don't ask those questions, because that game, like this one, is predominantly challenge aesthetic, right? But through, again, minimalist design and just the cognitive dissonance, the uncanniness registered by GLaDOS and by the testing chambers and by the weirdly unpopulated areas, forces your brain to kind of say, like, wait, what is going on? Who am I? You know, like, you don't even know that, right? You know, to the point where.
So I don't want to cut you off, but are you about to talk about when you leave the first chamber?
No.
Okay. So when the game starts, you're in like your terrifying little jail cell, basically, and like, oh, testing is about to start. And because it's a first person game, you can't see yourself. Shell is not on the box. Like, you have no idea who you are. And if you, the player, know that this game is set in the Half-Life universe, you might be like, am I Gordon? Like, what is any of this, right? So the very first portal you go through is fired by GLaDOS, and it is positioned in such a way that as you go through the portal, you see yourself going through the portal. So you learn a whole lot mechanically just in that one little interaction that we won't get into right now. But most importantly, it shows you who you are in a game where typically the first person is not, like, it doesn't really matter that much in a lot of FPS games, right? But the very first thing it uses the core game mechanic to do is to show you what you look like. And it's just like, oh shit, like, they care about me seeing that.
Well, and that's the thing, is that visual is a kick to your brain of like, oh, what? Wait. And then so you like kind of take a few steps forward, because you're like, wait, am I looking at like someone else? No, this is me. And then all of a sudden your brain starts chewing on that as you kind of leave the chamber. No, what I was going to say is, you know, once you escape, after you refuse to take the party submission position, and you move on after chamber 19, one of the things that GLaDOS throws at you is, you know, you're not a good person, right? Good people don't end up here.
That line. Ooh.
Yeah. Right. You know, so you're like, where is here? Why am I here? You know, like, what? Because like, you don't trust GLaDOS, obviously. You know, she is trying to get under your skin, right? Which is amazing. And so I say all that to say, you know, yeah, where am I? When am I? Who am I? You know, I know that I'm a woman, you know, and that I am a test subject, but you almost feel that like the amnesia that you as the player are feeling is an amnesia that the character is feeling as well, right? So basically they create this negative space narratively for you to just dump information into, which is just like the visuals. You know, it's so amazing how thoroughly they emptied the cup. But then, so it's almost like the Prestige. It's like a magic trick where they say, you know, all we're going to do is we're just going to hand people empty cups, and they're all going to walk up to the soda fountain machine, and we're going to do it for 100 people. And at the end, you know, Penn and Teller reveal that everyone got Dr. Pepper, you know, and it's like, But they could have picked anything. It's like they could have, but everyone made this same choice. And it's like, how did you do that? It's like, how did you do that? How did you make it so that way you painted the room in nothing and everyone went in the same direction? You created no backstory, no narrative, but yet and everyone suddenly cares so deeply about this narrative. It's really impressive.
I wanted to say a couple other things about the visuals, specifically in the use of what I'm going to call a complete lack of ambiguity. You never ever wonder, like, did the thing that I think happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you depress a button, like Gigaton button, it has some silly name. When you depress a button with a cube or a companion cube, the little lights that go away from that button change color, and the sign at the end of the button changes from an X to a check, and that's super obvious. And so even if you don't see like what it did, you can literally follow the glowing lights to what that button acted on, right? Usually it opens a door, but sometimes it moves platforms and stuff. So the super stark visuals of the like set design, right? So the floor, ceiling, walls, the signs and stuff mean that anytime anything happens in your field of vision, you can pretty much track like, is there a portal? Yes, it's the giant glowing circle, right? It's right there. It's the giant glowing circle. You know the portal's out, right? Even the little reticle on your gun shows you which portal you fired last. Like it highlights on the side. If you have a portal out, it's the reticle's half illuminated. So I suspect, I'm not colorblind. I suspect you could play this game completely colorblind, because even though the colors are super helpful, they never, to the best of my recollection at this moment, use only color, right? So the turrets are the only thing that look like turrets. The portals are the only thing that looks like portals. The companion cubes and the little lights on the buttons, like, those are the only things that look like that. So it's never like, well, did you press the blue button? Like, every single button in the game is red. All of them, right? Every single cube works the same. Every single little light up path on the ground looks and works exactly the same. So like, it might, if you were truly colorblind, like grayscale colorblind, it might be a little annoying not to know which one of your portals you're looking at. But even that, you have the little indicator on the reticle. So you could learn to just key off of that, which I'm sure if you're colorblind, you would have to do. Like, it's incredible how meaningful every single little thing becomes when it's against like an otherwise plain white canvas.
No, agreed 100%. And not only that, but every time that you do a thing, if you do it again, it does the thing again, you know? And I have this in visuals because it is a very visual thing, which is that, like, so for example, when you push a button to generate a cube, right? It generates a cube. And the thing is that the puzzle only works if you have one cube, right? You know, like, so if you could just generate infinite cubes, now it's not a puzzle anymore. Now it's a cube making game. So if you press the button again, it fizzles the old cube and generates a new one, right? And I say that because if you press a button and you're like, I don't know what that did, press it again. Press it 15 times. Press it 15 times and look around. It doesn't matter, because it'll just keep doing the same thing over and over again. There's no point where you can kind of get yourself into a corner mechanically where you're like, I don't know what to happen. Basically, if you eventually get frustrated, you could probably, for most of the areas, you could just walk back to the beginning, walk back out and say, okay, let me try this again. Let me shake this off, get my head straight, and say, okay, I'm going to walk in, I'm going to push this button again, I'm going to step on this thing again, I'm going to, you know, and go from there. The only other thing that, do we want to talk about the hitbox now or in mechanics?
Let's say now.
Okay. So the hitbox is very generous, and that is very good in one case and very bad in another. It's very generous for like energy, the high energy pellet, right? You know, if it's anywhere near where it's supposed to go, it registers the hit, which is, is nice.
Super generous, yeah.
Yeah. If the cube that you're walking with is anywhere near the outside of that portal, it is going to rip it out of your hands, you know? And
yeah.
And that's just, it's, again, you know, like, was it game breaking? No. was it frustrating a couple of times when I didn't have myself lined up quite right, and I just felt like I watched the cube clip on the edge of the thing. I was like, no, it just ripped it right out of my hands. Did I like that? No. Does it make sense in the universe? Yes. I mean, like, my hands were outside of the thing. I almost ripped my hands off. Of course I let the thing go. But I didn't like it, you know?
I do think with the high energy particle that
pellet.
Sorry. With with the high energy pedant.
No, that's me.
There's a huge benefit to that hitbox being so generous, like large, which is it. I think there are a few times where you could conceive of a solution to a puzzle that involves being very intimate with the particle, the pellet, right? And you won't. You'll die. You'll die like all the times, because if it's anywhere near you, it's a one-hit kill, right? And so I think that the visual of like, oh, I don't know, it was only kind of close to me, reinforces the mechanic of that's not how you do this, right? Like, because if it looked like, oh, maybe if I was just a little bit faster down this hallway, or maybe if I duck it the last second, or maybe if I, turn my body super sharply, it'll like just go whizzing past me. And it's like, no, we're going to make it look like we're going to kill you, even if it doesn't look like it should have hit you, so that you like separate those things in your mind. Like, take this visual of catastrophic failure, even when you think you should have succeeded, and internalize that as, don't try to solve the puzzle this way. So like, right. It's I would be surprised if there was any other time in a game we've played where I would say like, it shouldn't have killed you, but it did, was like the absolute right choice. Like, whereas here I would say like, yes, even though it looks like I ducked under it or I stepped to the side of it, it hit me and it one hit killed me. But like, that feedback is, I think, the right feedback in this situation.
The only other thing I have for visuals, which is kind of I know we're probably running long for visuals, but it's a little meatier thing, is there's in stage 18, I can say it is by far the worst when it happens. But when you fall through the portal, when you have to reorient yourself based off of where up and down is.
Oh, is that the uppy downy platforms?
Yeah.
Yeah. That room, man, when you nail that room, you feel like such a champion. And when you get stuck there, you're like, I know what to do. I just can't do it.
Well, and what's worse is that I don't get motion sick, but I know if a game is making me a little motion sick, that it's bad, because I don't deal with that. Literally, I was playing this game and it was right before bedtime, and Megan said, maybe don't give the kids motion sickness before they go to bed, like, because she was watching it and was like, I can't even stare at this, right? So I say all of that to say that there would be, and I get the idea, and again, the mechanic was brand new, like to us, like thinking with portals is old hat now. It's like, how could they have screwed this up? But back in the day, it was completely new. So, but the idea of it's like, okay, if your feet go down in the portal, and they know from the level design that you're going to then need to pop up and reorient yourself, just automatically reorient me the minute that I touch the portal. That's the call, because the time it takes the game to forcibly reorient you is really, really dizzying, and it's just problematic. But
yeah.
That being said, it's an issue very, very rarely.
Yeah, they make you go through portals and continue your momentum a lot. They don't make you go through portals and have to deal with disorientation, like literal disorientation, like upside down, terribly often. And there are even a few times where it's like, if you came out of this portal upside down, you may have kind of made a mistake, right? Like, maybe you still landed on the correct platform, but if you came skidding in on your neck and shoulders, like that was probably not what they intended.
Well, and also too, in stage 18 is the only time when it like matters. So most of the time, if you're flying out of a portal, you put a portal to a high place, which means that the bottom of the portal is oriented down. And more likely than not, if you're walking through a portal, you're just going to portal and walk through it, which means that the bottom is oriented down. So that means you're down, you know? There were definitely a few times when that was not the case, but also too, the end to that was I then hit where I was going and was done, right? So I didn't have to it didn't matter how I was reorienting in space. I just waited until my movement stopped, and then I was done, right? It's only in stage 18 where they say, no, that's not going to be the case. You need to reorient yourself in midair and then portal, where all of a sudden you become very much so aware of how your relationship to the universe is maintained when you go through portals, and how that can be problematic, especially when you're trying to do momentum conservation. Oh, by the way, real fun final side note is this game did cause for me to attempt to explain to my 6-year-old what momentum is.
Sounds like that test was not successful.
It's momentum is one of those things that once you've been on the Earth for a while, you kind of have a feel for what it is already. If you don't have a feel for it, having some 36-year-old mathematician, saying like, well, it's momentum is your mass times your velocity. It's like, well, what's any of those things? It's like, that doesn't help.
Yeah. Two last things for visuals for me. One is, I was thinking about motion sickness when I was playing, but then I promptly forgot because I luckily do not get motion sickness. So I sort of spaced out on it. But the other thing is that made me Google Portal VR, and there is a VR mod. It's not official, but there is like a Portal-like game that's you can play in VR. That might make me motion sick. That we might actually have to draw the line there, because everybody gets motion sick. The question is just at what point, like how disoriented you have to be. But that would probably make me puke. The thing I wanted to actually say about the game is, I think it's important to mention the dark gray non-portalable walls that start to get introduced in the later puzzles. Probably in like the second half. Because not only are they super visually distinct, right? Where it's like, oh, these are super dark. I cannot portal onto that surface. But now, instead of being in like a rectangular solid space, you're thinking about like each wall as like a solid plane. And then it's broken up into this topography of portable surfaces and non-portable surfaces. And because it's literally black and white, right? It's like you have white walls that are helpful and you have black walls that you can't use to solve puzzles. And looking at the world that way is how they start to drip out hints about some of the later puzzles. It's like, oh, well, how would I get way up there? There's nothing I can portal onto. And it's like, right, the only portalable wall that's up at that altitude is way the hell over there, which means you're going to have to come out of that wall with a crap load of momentum to eject you all the way over to that platform you want to land onto, right? Whereas if more of the wall was portalable, it would probably make the puzzle harder, but it would also like rob it of some of the sense of satisfaction that you found the right solution, not just a right solution, right? It's like when you do an actual like jigsaw puzzle, the point at the end is to see the picture, right? It's like, oh, look, I now have an uninterrupted picture. There are multiple ways you can do some of the levels in Portal, but like the visual design is such that they're like, there is a right answer, right? So like, no matter how stumped you are, the game doesn't just stop here. And you can tell that there's some place you can shoot a portal onto that maybe you haven't yet, right? Or there's a button you still haven't pressed. You don't even know what that button does, right? It's a bright red button over there. Don't you want to go press it? Bright red button. So like, I just love that little use of color to either draw your attention, like this is the thing I need to go seek out or interact with, or in the case of like the green muck water that kills you, or like the dark gray walls that you can't portal onto, it's like, okay, those are things I want to stay away from, or that can't help me.
Well, and to your point, one of the things that somebody said to me a while ago about auditors, but I think is true about this game as well, is because there are a lot of different ways. I mean, even like in the early rooms, there are different ways to solve the puzzle. Ultimately, it's like, I got to get these 2 blocks onto these 2 buttons, right? But, you could do it in 4 portals, or you could do it in like 16 portals, but ultimately, like, it's going to get to the same place, which is that the game designers, but then to also come back to your point, right, where it's like, but if you're trying to, like matrix dodge around the energy pellet, or if you're trying to do anything weird, it's like, no, that's not the way to solve this puzzle, and we'll punish you for it, right? GLaDOS will punish you for that. So is that the game makes sure that every solution is a colored pencil, right? So they may make their mark a little bit differetly, and it may be a different shade, and may look a little bit different, but they're all colored pencils. They're not crayons, they're not markers, they're not, scrawled in like hand etchings. It's none of that, right? So that to me is kind of to your point, right? Where it's like the visuals kind of funnel you into, are you a colored pencil? Because if you're not, then we're not going to let you pass. But if you did it, I mean, like with the turrets, oh, well, I grabbed a turret and then like, ran behind one and like knocked it out, or I portaled onto a wall and then portaled directly underneath the turret and just giggled. Like both solutions, they will let you get away with either of those 2. But audio,
yeah, you should have been happy this game doesn't have any music, so you didn't have any music to judge.
That's too. Like right when you wake up, it goes.
Yeah, it's like a little kind of samba cover of Still Alive.
Yeah, so for me, I did love the audio. I actually have 4 audio notes, which is way more audio notes than I normally have.
Yeah, dude, take it away.
Yeah, man, because like it's like, oh, well, there was no music. It's like, so of course I have tons of audio notes.
See, this is it. You need the negative space to project the song in your heart onto.
Exactly. So GLaDOS, so first of all, the game is constantly giving you the tutorial, right, through a big giant data dump, right, which normally would be awful, except that it's all steeped in GLaDOS's character, which is delightful. So GLaDOS is constantly talking to you, but what she's delivering is 2 things. One is actually how to play the game, right? So it says, you congratulations, you have just learned how momentum is lost through portals, or more specifically, how it is not, or how it's impacted by portals, so speedy thing goes in, speedy thing comes out, stuff like that, right? She says things like that and you're like, ha, neat, so she's delivering how to play the game, but she's also delivering this the narrative, right, of what's going on, and just little things that she does, like for example, this test chamber is unsolvable, right? And then you solve it, and she goes like, yeah, I'm so sorry, that was part of protocol, but now we won't lie to you anymore in 3, 2, and you're like, wait, what just happened? Like, did you cut out? Like, did you just glitch out? Did you actually glitch out? Like, all of that is just constantly rattling around in your head. So the fact that the tutorial is delivered through audio, normally I would just crap all over that. But because it's done through this amazing character that has narrative presence and narrative meaning, it works, man. It works really well.
And she is essentially the only character in the universe, right? Because you can see yourself by clever use of portals, but you don't speak. You never take any actions that aren't driven by the player's hand on the controller, right? So like, there's no cutscenes where Shell like does stuff. So the only person's voice you ever hear, until technically, at the very, very end.
I was going to say that there's one other character that doesn't talk in the game. It's your companion cube.
Oh, that's true. They are sentient, We just have a lot of them. Her presence as a character, as the only character, is, I think, she's doing an absolutely Herculean amount of work, because GLaDOS controls the facility you're in, but in some ways she kind of is the facility you're in, right? So everything you see, like she put it there, right? Like every she is the DM, right? Like every chest she put it there. She's like a third person omniscient narrator who's guiding you along, and then she slowly starts to drip in bits of personality and like her own opinion about things and stuff, and like it's horrifying because like you're kind of inside of her, and this is like God talking to you, and God seems to sort of not really care if you live or die. Like death is just a data point that needs to be noted. And there are a lot of like iconic voice actors that it's like, oh man, this role wouldn't be the same without so-and-so. But imagining the voice of GLaDOS as anyone else, the woman, her name is, I actually wrote it down. It's Ellen McLean, which I did not go and look that up. Someone in Twitch chat said it to me. And I was like, I'm going to write that down. Doesn't count as research. But
somebody yelled at me on the street.
Yeah, pretty much. But like she is so integral to the character. Like she is GLaDOS the way Jodie Benson is the Little Mermaid, right? Like they're just inseparable in this way that the writing is incredible. The voice modulation thing that they do to make her voice sound so creepy is incredible. And like all of that audio stuff they do to make her voice, but her delivery of those lines is everything. She's the only character in the universe. Like without her, this would literally just be like a little sandbox. All of the tension, all of the drama, all of the hope, like every emotion you have essentially comes from her. There's one other piece of music that I can think of in the game, because there's lots of like ambient noise and stuff, but there's one piece of music, and it's at the very end when she tells you like, okay, like we're done with you now, don't worry, the portal gun can handle temperatures up to like 4,000 degrees. There's like a very bit of tense,
you in the face.
Yeah, there's like a very bit of tense kind of like little electronica music, and that's like, if it's not literally the only time other than the songs that are the Still Live song played on the radio, it's one of the only times, and which just makes it even more terrifying because her voice goes away and then the music comes in it's like the dawning horror, right? It's essentially supposed to be like a ringing in your ears. But then very notably after that, her voice is not cool and calculating anymore because you are no longer experiment and scientist. Like that's not your relationship with her anymore. You are now a threat. She sounds afraid. She sounds angry. She panics a few times. Like her performance escalates in a way that tells you, the player, exactly how you are supposed to be feeling. Like you have an opportunity to gain the upper hand, but you have not gained it yet.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. That's one of the notes I have was that, the music right before being set on fire is good and it jars you awake, right? So like you're sitting there and the platform is moving at the same rate that all the platforms move, but that slows way down, and this music kind of kicks online, which all of a sudden gets your heart rate going. So like kind of time slows down. So it gives you a lot of time to kind of think about like, no, this isn't, I'm not going to die in this fire, and then the solution to that puzzle is very easy, because they want you to have that like, oh, I escaped by the skin of my teeth, but really they do everything they can to make sure that you are focused and ready to do that. And yeah, no, then all of a sudden her, that's when she starts threatening you and starts like making fun of you personally. That when she says things like, oh, you're going the wrong way, or, that's when she delivers the line, you're not a good person. Good people don't end up here. She's trying to do everything that she can to, get you to kind of break down and assume the party submission position.
Well, and right when you first get out of that area, she says something, and then she starts to like bargain with you a little. She's like, okay, we weren't really going to kill you. And you can hear like that panic start to slip into her voice where she's like, if I don't regain control right now, I may not get it back. And then I think she only does this a couple of times, but like the turrets have she also voices the turrets, and they have kind of a cuter. It's like a little. It's pitched up a little bit.
Still there?
Yes, that exactly. So they. When they lose sight of you, they call out and they're like, "Are you still there?" They say hello, but it's kind of like it's like a creepy childlike inquisitiveness because they're trying to shoot you. But when you first break out after Chamber 19, and she first starts to realize that she's losing control, one of the most haunting lines of dialogue to me in the entire game is she just goes, "Hello," and it's like. There's this moment where it's like, that's not fair to her. I should have just died in the fire because she's terrified of losing track of you coming and killing her, of her being alone. Like she is completely lost. And for all of that emotion to be communicated in 5 little letters and a question mark, it's just like, oh man, I'm pretty sure they don't do Oscars for video game performances, but geez.
Well, and also too, I think that she the voice actress that did this did 2 things really, really well, and I think that's conveyed in the writing and in the delivery, which is that when you're in the test chambers, she's thinking about things very clinically, and you said like this, she's third person omniscient, and she is to a degree, but she is kind of telling everything from her point of view, right? So I think to me the line that really hammers that home is basically, if failing this test will result in an unsatisfactory mark on your report, followed by death. It's because again, that's the order of importance to her, right? Is that it's like you will fail the test, and that will be bad. I mean, you'll also die, but the first thing, right? So but that pause, right? Like, so the writing is there, but the pause, it's like on your test report, followed by death, like that gives your brain just enough time to be like, oh, well, she doesn't care, right? And then also too is that she is ultimately a machine, an AI, right? Governed by laws, right? So when you literally rip a piece of her personality off and throw it into the fire, right? And she's like, oh, I just realized what that thing you just did. That's like the fact that her voice like drops and is less modulated, and all of a sudden you're like, in that moment, and I'm sure this is the emotion I want you to feel, is you're like, did I do the right thing? I don't know if I should have thrown that thing. Maybe I should have gone back to the test chamber. I don't really want to play anymore. I'm going to go play.
Apparently because when you blow the pieces off of her, they have like the little green, I don't know, you'd call it like tractor beam kind of thing on it. Yep. And the first piece that she drops that starts the fight when you destroy her, is it empathy core?
It is the morality core.
Morality core. That's it. There's apparently a very large fan contingent that's like, she can't destroy it, but she knows you can, right? So she drops it because she's like, oh, I don't know what that thing you just did was, or what that thing I just dropped was. It's probably nothing, right? And so it's not until you destroy it that she's like, now I can kill you, right?
Because that's when the turret comes out and all that kind of stuff.
And again, like all of that tension, because she's up on the ceiling, right? And the one turret comes out. Like visually, the boss fight with her is not particularly spectacular, but you're terrified all because of her voice acting, right? There is a little bit of music. There is the sound of like the gas streaming into the chamber, but like her change in tone, like you said, some of the modulation goes away and then it comes back when she like gets angry again. Like all of that performance is what makes that so tense. Like the battle itself is actually incredibly trivial mechanically, right? If you got to the final boss, you should be able to beat her based on everything you learned in the puzzle chambers, but you could very easily make a bunch of mistakes because she is threatening you in that terrifying way she speaks the entire time, right? So like you're on edge completely because of this like soft woman's voice telling you she's going to like blow you up with a missile.
The final so the 2 final notes I have is, one is that when you are in the test chambers, right, and this will be the final note on the amazingness that is GLaDOS's voice, is that she will like they'll duck her out from time to time, right? Like just, and again, is that everything so pristine and so well kept, especially in the first few test chambers, right? But then all of a sudden, the fact that the enrichment centers, like AI voice is occasionally dropping out and modulated and weird, it kind of makes it makes it feel like it's run down. And now it starts to make all the visuals look like a facade, which they are, So I thought that was very well done. Also, there's a sound effect for walking through vents. I just thought that was kind of a nice touch.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, there's basically you and GLaDOS. There's the sound that it makes when you portal. There's the sound that it makes when you hit the ground, like when you're and like moving at terminal velocity, and when you hit the ground, and vents, because you climb through some vents.
Well, and this is to be the other side of the coin to your visual note. All of with the exception of like some musical pieces, all of the audio in this game is diegetic UI, right? So when you press a button, the button makes a noise, the thing lighting up makes a noise, and the door opening or the platform moving makes a noise. The doors always make the same noise. The platforms always make the same noise, right? They kind of like wall, because they're on like the little thing. And so there are times in some of the bigger puzzle chambers where you may have your back to where the thing is that the button acts on. But if you can hear a door open, it opened a door. If you can hear a wall, then it made a platform move, right? When you the little particle pellet makes
high energy pellet.
Yes, the energy pellet, the high energy pellet. It bounces, off surfaces, which I forgot to mention in visuals. Not only does it leave a little scorch mark where it bounced, so that if you are having trouble figuring out where it's going to bounce, because it leaves a permanent scorch mark there. But before it pops and the thing is going to fire another one, it fades out, right? So you can tell by looking at it, it's going to pop soon. And if you have your back to it, it just bounced off a surface because that's the only thing in the universe that makes that noise, right? So the portals, like everything makes a noise that helps you understand what is going on. I think you could probably get away with playing this game totally silent, but not only would that be just absolutely the worst possible idea, and don't play this game without the audio, but I think the fact that all of the sounds are useful in understanding like kind of how you're oriented in the world is great. And the fact that the portal sound, which you hear 80,000 damn times, is like pleasant. It's a pleasant noise. It's like the like, it's like it's a little like magic wand kind of sound. It's just like, and then it makes like the little satisfying like plop when it like opens on a surface. It's just, it's great, right? Like how many games have a gun firing noise that not only do you not learn to ignore, but actually is like pleasant and you're happy to hear it? Because it's like, hey, I fired a portal and it opened, on the surface where I meant for it to open, right? It's like, it's good. Most people would kill to have a noise that repetitive that doesn't make you want to rip your eyeballs out.
I mean, the only one I can think that even comes close is Mario walking in Donkey Kong.
Yeah, but I mean, they spent all of their budget on that sound effect.
So much money. They just made it rain. Yeah. And they clearly wanted to show it off. Controls and mechanics?
Yeah. Well, okay. Just before we go on to controls and mechanics, do we want to spend any time gushing about the piece of pop culture that is the song Still Alive? Because I mean, there's a relevant part of the audio section.
Yeah. How are we doing on time?
You don't tell Portal when you're done. Portal tells you when you're done.
I will say that I really, really like Still Alive. The end songs, are just do such a great job. Ultimately, first of all, they do some narrative heavy lifting, which is awesome, but also they do such a great job kind of reframing what just happened, so like the whole like still alive, it's like, and believe me, I am still alive, like this was, it's like, hey, I'm happy for you, like this is fantastic. You did the thing I really wanted you to do. You're like, wait, was this part of the test? Like it's It's a real great eyebrow raise. It really reframes like, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to defeat GLaDOS? Because if you are, you can't. She's a machine. If you're just trying to get away, then you might be able to get that accomplished. But if you watch the ending, it doesn't really go down that way.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing about the Still Alive as a piece of music is, I think you're absolutely right to say, like, it does a lot of narrative bow wrapping, right? Like it puts a nice conclusion to the story you just went through. It is also just a really pleasant piece of music, right? And fun thing about Ellen McLain is she's a professional opera singer. So like if you are going to have someone like that do the voice for your character, it's like we're going to make her sing, right? And it all, like, it's a very chicken and egg, like, which came first, the opera singer or using the opera singer in a creative way in the game? Because the fact that she sings a song to you at the end of the game is haunting, right? It further reinforces the, like, somewhat, like, Lovecraftian, like, impossible to understand otherworldly cosmic horror that is GLaDOS. Like, you don't understand her motives. Like, her thinking is beyond your comprehension, and nothing really drives that home quite like the robot you definitely just killed, right? Singing a song about how she's super not dead and she is still very angry with you, but at least we did some science. So, like, it's to have something that is so bookendy, like, it's like nobody after they read a novel turns the novel over and is like, man, this summary on the dust jacket, just so good, right? But that's kind of what this is it's like, it's a summary of, like, let's rehash everything that just happened. She basically describes the game to you that you just played through, and yet it's still good enough that if you're on a short car trip, you're like, I'm going to put on Still Alive.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I definitely have this in a playlist, and my kids have listened to it and requested it. So no, it's just a great song.
Yeah. Now we could do Controls and Mechanics. Yeah.
So basically, and we've kind of mentioned this, so I'll kind of throw it away as kind of a dipping our toe into Controls and Mechanics, which is that the framing device of all of this being testing in a test chamber and all that kind of stuff, it does a lot of the heavy lifting of the fact that this game has to spend a lot of time teaching you, like if these mechanics were parsed out to you in a normal game like this, it would have to be done very delicately for you to not feel patronized, right? But in this game, because it is a test chamber, right? They can say, like, okay, in Chamber 1, we're just going to show you how to work with boxes and buttons, right? Because it's really important that you know that. And they have literal gating mechanics. Like, there is a gate that doesn't open until you've done the thing, right? So it's not like veiled behind some, box that you hit or some, cliff that you can't jump over. It's like, no, there's a gate. These are all gating mechanics. Every single room is a gating mechanic where we're going to teach you a specific new thing. And then sometimes we'll teach you how two of these things work in conjunction with one another. But that's what we're doing. And so literally, to create a game that is not 90% tutorial, I would argue that all of the test chambers are the tutorial. You're not done with the tutorial until you get past your victory incandescence. That's when the tutorial ends. If somebody said, like, I'm going to make a game, I am going to create a game mechanic that is so complex that it will take me 75% of the game to teach it to the player before I let them really cut loose with it. I mean, for most game devs would say you are outside of your mind and fired. Instead, they said, drop out of college and come work for us.
Yeah, no, dude, this game is, you could make an argument that the escape, which is what that last segment is called, the escape and the fight with GLaDOS is the game. Like, that's the game, and everything else is the tutorial leading up to the game, which is the one boss fight.
Yes, there's one boss fight, and that's kind of the way I interpret it, which I think is amazing. Also, too, they start off with, like, hey, here's just some blocks, right, and all that sort of stuff. But then they start to introduce you to the portal, right, the main mechanic. You start the game with one portal, right? they control half of the portal gun, you know? So they just, again, they ease you into it, right? Because if all of a sudden they were like, here's the portal gun, go nuts, you'd lose your mind, you know? You'd be like, I'm in a portal here, I don't know what to do, I don't even know where to start. But the fact that they said like, okay, we've got point A, point B, point C. You need to get to point C. You can't get to any of them, but there's a portal at point B. So you realize that if I portal near to me, I can get to point B. And now that I'm at point B, I can now portal to where I want to go, and that will get me to point C. So the fact that they're like, we're going to anchor this portal here so you can't screw this up. So much so that when I recognized that was the way that they were teaching it to me, it's the way I teach it to my son. Because like, he was struggling a little bit. I'm like, Teddy, blue where you are, orange where you want to go. And that's what he does. And literally he internalized it to the point where he will, if he accidentally puts orange where he is and blue where he wants to go, he'll swap them back. You know, because he doesn't, because he's like, no, orange where I want to go, no. Blue where I am. And I was like, yes, if you remember that will help you get there. And so now all of a sudden, and he can, so the fact that, again, the way I knew how to teach that is because that's the way the game taught me. And they did it without bodies of text. And yeah, they did do it with some audio cues, but those were awesome, as we just said. So yeah, the fact that they start you off with half the gun, very wise.
So I have this note in here. I don't know how mature this thought is, but let me try and lay this on you and see what you think. So I think it's pretty indisputable that this game is super lean, right? I think the first time I ever played this, it took me 5-ish hours to get through, somewhere around there, maybe a little bit less than that. When I played it a couple weeks ago, when we first decided we were going to play this for the show, it took me an hour and 54 minutes, and that was on stream talking to people. And I was like, wow, I remembered way more of this. Not exactly what the solutions were, but like, because I know how to use the tools, right? I know how to use the hammer. I know how to use the screwdriver. I know how to use the power drill. So I was like, okay, if I see something that needs a hammer, I already know how to use a hammer, right? The game doesn't have to teach me, even though it does a really good job of that. Like, I already know how the hammer works. So I got through super fast to the point where I actually went back and I was like, I wonder how fast I could do it if I was trying to do it fast. And I, on my one and only attempt, because I only got to try that once, but I got it in under 90 minutes. I think I did it in like 78 minutes or something. And
nice.
I was just like, man, because you can really, like, once you know exactly how the portals work and you deeply internalize the layout, which I haven't, but when you start to deeply internalize like the layout of the stuff, you can just blast through, right? And what that started to make me realize was two things. One, this game has no fluff. There's no filler. There's no BS. The minute they are sure you have all of the tools you need to be successful, you kill GLaDOS and you get credits, right? Like, well, she's not dead. You think you defeated GLaDOS and then you get credits, right? But I think that is something more games need to consider doing, right? Is like, they could have done, I'm sure they left a ton of test chambers on the cutting room floor, right? They could have made this game 5 times longer, maybe 1,000 times longer if they wanted to. There's modding tools where, users can create their own test chambers, and later they like made that an official part of the community and stuff. What I think is interesting about this, they took this mechanic that they just started to really let you sink your teeth into, and then they essentially say, okay, the game's done now. And the reason that doesn't feel like a slap in the face to me is because the narrative is so well distributed from when you select start new game all the way up to when the credits end. Like, you feel this very cohesive narrative arc that when you're done, you're like, man, that was really good. That was really good. And at no point did I really ever catch myself saying, God, I wish it had been longer. God, I wish it had been shorter. Oh, I hated this one chamber. I hated this one stupid puzzle thing that they made me have to do. Like, my old boss used the phrase perfect movie to describe a movie that it wasn't that it was without faults, but it was that there's nothing you could add or remove right? Like this thing wouldn't be this thing if you made even a single change. And like that is how the kind of jiving of the mechanics and the narrative feel to me. And what I realized is this game is a visual novel that's delivered as a first person shooter. Like you are 1000% in it because of GLaDOS and because of the story, right? The mechanics are crazy fun. Portals are fun, right? Like companion cubes are fun. Like the toys that you get to play with are fun, but that's not why you stay, right? You come for the steak, but you stay for the pie. Like without GLaDOS, I don't think this game would even get to the 3-hour mark, right? Like you would say like, oh yeah, this is fun. You know, I can make myself fall in an infinite pit, or I can, you know, rocket companion cubes against the wall at 1,000 miles an hour. Like, ha ha ha. But without that super clear narrative objective, I feel like even these incredibly polished mechanics would fall down. And that's where I kind of landed on this. Like, this is a visual novel that's delivered at the barrel of a gun. Like you're here for the character and the story and the world, and you just get those things at the barrel of a portal gun.
So while you were talking about that, you know the current world record for Portal?
Wait, which category though? Because what I did was I actually completed every chamber.
It's saying the
Are you looking at the glitchless category?
It shouldn't be glitches. I don't believe so.
Okay, because if you're looking at a category that includes glitches, yeah, it's probably like 4 minutes or something.
It says completes the game in 8 minutes and 31 seconds.
So that involves clipping and going out of bounds. Do you see a tab for glitchless?
No.
Okay, so there is a category where it's like, no, you have to actually complete all the chambers. And even that, it's like 28 minutes. It's something insanely fast because, and when you watch people do it, you're just like, oh my God. Like that's, if we had portals in like portal guns in real life, like that is, it's like Ultimate Ninja Warrior with portals, like people just zipping through billion miles an hour. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah. There we go. Glitchless. 14 minutes, 55 seconds.
14 minutes.
Yeah,
so barely faster than someone who clips through the walls and breaks the game.
Yep. Yeah. So all that. So but that's the thing though, is and to your point, right, is that, and that's one of the things I wanted to mention, is that you can play against yourself for efficiency, right? You know, they're you know, when there's a box at the bottom of a pit, you know, I would go down to the pit and I'd portal out and grab the box and go, right? Then all of a sudden I realized I don't need to do any of that. I can just portal and then portal underneath the box, and then it just falls out onto the thing that I needed to do. I'm like, oh, that's better, faster. It makes me feel good. So just to a few other rapid fire notes. One is they threw in the emancipation grills to keep you from breaking anything, you know, so, I'm going to take this stuff with me and screw everything up. They kind of make you think that the tutorial is ending early and that you're on your own, but you're emphatically not, you know. There's a couple times where they're like, nope, this is it, man, you're all on your own. And then it's not until you get to section 19 that you realize that you really aren't. So one of the things, though, that that I really appreciated is you have effectively a bananas amount of hit points, right? I mean,
go on.
in the sense that you can get shot quite a bit before you expire, right?
That is true.
Yeah, because the thing is that the point isn't, I mean, I would say that you can get shot more than you can in, like, you know, in some Doom scenarios, right? I mean, you know,
you may be able to get shot more than you can in Half-Life.
Exactly, right? But the reason why is because they're not trying to make, all they're trying to do with the bullets is say, if you get shot too many times, then you're doing the puzzle wrong, right? You have hit points that are proportional to just dissuade you from solving the puzzle that way. The way to solve the puzzle with the turret is not to run directly up to the turret and punch it in its face, right? If you try to do that, you will die. But if you're like walking by the turret and it sees you and snipes you a couple of times, it's like, don't worry about that, because you didn't really fail. You weren't, because a failure state is when you're trying to solve the puzzle incorrectly, not when you make a mistake, right? So that's why you have just this bananas amount of hit points, which I really appreciated, because, there were definitely a couple times where I got like snagged by a turret. And I was like, oh, okay, I didn't know they could see this far. Got it, But then every single time I tried to brute force my way around a turret, it wouldn't work. I just could not get it to work, and that's what they're going for. So even though it is unrealistic, considering the fact that, it's you're human, right? And it's
you're
very,
in like a tank top and a jumpsuit.
Tank top and a jumpsuit. It's supposed to be like kind of like a horror aesthetic, more so than an empowerment one that you can take like 15 friggin' bullets. But again, I felt that was the correct choice for the game,
Well, and it's a little similar to like what the obstacle functions as in the environment. And it's not exactly like the conversation we had in the Doom 2016 episode about like projectile and hit scan weapons, but it's sort of a similar thing of, if you fall into the muck, like the green toxic water, like you can never get out. I can't think of any time where you can fall into water and then get back out of water. Like water always kills you, right? And it kills you quickly, but not instantly, but it's really fast. The high energy sphere, that is a one hit kill, right? Instant death. If a cube falls on you, you get hurt, but can it fall from a great enough height that it kills you? I don't think it can.
Think so. Yeah.
No. But it will hurt you if it falls on you, right? And I think it knocks you back like a tiny bit. But the turrets are one of in fact, I think they are the only obstacle that can kill you, but that has a failure spectrum. And because it has a spectrum, it lets them use them more liberally in the environment, right? If everywhere you went, you were just one, press of the wrong key away from falling into a pit, like that wouldn't be as much fun. If everywhere you went, there were high energy pellets flying around and they all one shot you, like that wouldn't really be as much fun. But they can be more liberal with the turrets because they don't one shot you, right? But they will always win. You can never stare down a turret. So they still have the ultimate steering effect that I think you're talking about, of like, you can't run down a turret. If it's firing at you, it will win. Always wins. Like, use your portal gun, you moron. But it lets them place them around the environment in ways that one hit kills would be frustrating. It wouldn't be satisfying, right? It would just feel like, oh, I have to do these 30 things perfectly in a row. Otherwise, I'm going to take one stray bullet and die. Like, that sucks, right? So I think having one, like making you a little bullet spongy is like, oh, well, yeah, because the mechanic of having a little bit of wiggle room before death is more valuable than like, well, they give you long fall boots, but you're bulletproof. Or shut up. This is here for the right reason.
And the one final note that I have on, and this is more of a nuanced thing, but I thought that it was, again, just shows the level of detail and care that they kind of put into everything, which is that right after section 19, right, you get out of that little pit, right? You're now behind the scenes, right? And so you walk up the stairs and you start to walk across, up and across the stairs, and the stairs collapse, right? And I felt that was important, because even though the entire game they've been hammering into you like the mechanics of the portal gun and how all this sort of works, this is different. You're now behind the scenes, right? So they make sure immediately, they're like, stop it. Don't walk. Use your portal gun. It's useful here too. It's not just in the test chambers. It's useful here. Don't forget. And I feel that the fact that they went out of their way to be like, oh yeah, just walk this way. No, jerk, use your portal gun, I felt that was
what did we just spend all that time teaching you?
It's like in a movie where it's just kind of like, hey, I'm not going to hit you. I'm not going to hit you. Just come here for a second. And then they slap you anyways. And they're like, I told you to trust no one, kind of a thing. But again, I felt that was important, because even though I played the game before, the minute I got out there, I was like, oh, I'm just going to walk across this thing. And it just didn't occur to me to use my portal gun, because there's walkable places. And it's like, no, again, I can't stress it. And I need you to follow me on this one. Use your portal gun. So I thought that was well done on their end.
And I will I will just segue this final thought I have into whether or not I thought this game held up, unless you have anything else.
Nope, go for it.
This game didn't just hold up. Like, it is probably even better now than I remember, because like I'm better at video games now, which means there's more stuff for me to appreciate. Like my palate has become more sophisticated. So even though I had a Kobe beef steak when I was 10, I really just wanted a McDonald's hamburger. But now I can truly appreciate more of the Kobe beef steak, right? Like, there's so much in this game that is so little, right? So little visuals, so little audio, so little time spent in the universe, and yet this game is more dense with game than some like I know you've played Skyrim. I know a lot of people love Skyrim. They just released another version of Skyrim. I've still never played Skyrim. When people talk about sinking 200-300 hours into a Skyrim or into like Fallout 4 or whatever, I'm just like, doing what? Like, what are you doing all the time, right? And it's, I'm sure they have a great time, and I'm not trying to like crap on the thing that they find fun, but this to me is so much more appetizing. Like a world and a mechanic and characters and a narrative that I am just champing at the bit for more of, but I don't feel like I was cheated, right? Like you go on the Steam store right now and you could buy Portal for, I think it's $15. It's like, this game is still worth $60. Like, if they were charging full price for this game right now, I say full price, right? Like the current standard for like a AAA game, and someone's like, oh man, a game is only 3 hours. Like, I wouldn't be able to slap them fast enough to get that bullshit thought out of their head. Like, it's just so rare that a game is willing to say, like, we did everything we came to do, and now we're done, because we don't want to sully the experience. So, like, not only no nostalgia goggles required, but like, how do you follow on to this?
So I'm just picturing somebody like at the checkout counter, with Portal, and, and so it just shows them, and there's a huge line. It's like Christmas, behind them, and it scans, and it's like $60. And they're like, isn't this game like 14 years old? And it's only 3 hours long. I don't know. And then you just hear like, ow, no, wait, ow. And they just like shows you just like clawing and like running over people to like try to slap this person.
Yeah. It's like there's that clip online of the stupid neo-Nazi douchebag, and he's being interviewed, and then the dude just comes flying from off camera and just like haymakers him and then runs off down the street. Like, I would be that guy. I'm the Nazi puncher. Like, if you decry this game for being too short, if you say it's too hard, if you say you don't like the horror aesthetic or whatever, like, that's totally fine, because those are taste things. Right. If you decry this game for being too short, I will come flying from off camera and knock you stupid.
So obviously no nostalgia goggles required. This game is lawful good, but it's like a paragon, right? So I say that it's like Superman, or what we can kind of more aptly see in the MCU. It's like Captain America, in the sense that, Captain America is lawful good, and everybody's like, oh, well, that must mean that he's a stick in the mud reset. But like, everyone who's ever been around him, it's like, he's the best. Oh my God, you met Cap? You got to be around Cap. They're just excited. It's this game, there's a reason why it's so popular, and a reason why it's coined the phrase like, now you're thinking with portals, literally this game, it as far as, the best game I have ever played, I still contend, is The Last of Us. The main reason why is because it caused me to empathize with a decision that a character made that I never would have empathized with otherwise. So that game taught me how to empathize with another human, right? This game, though, taught me how to think about physics in a completely different fashion, and it did it not by making me feel like I was in school, but actually making me beg for more. And then they created Portal 2, where they made tons more. I played this game so hard that I am already playing Portal 2. I mean, like, we should review that next.
Can we just do that? Like, can we just go do an episode on Portal 2?
I mean, I've got the time. Let's do Portal 2 now. Portal 2?
Portal 2.